Now, we really are brothers and sisters, whether we want to be or not. And you see, that's the fundamental thing about a family. I didn't choose my parents. I don't know about y'all. You know, I didn't choose my brothers and sisters or cousins. I had nothing to do with it. If I could have chose some, I might have made some changes. You know, that's the nature of a family. You're a family not because you want to be related to someone, but because that's the way the world is. And all of us in our families have people that we can't stand. We can all say this openly now. You know. I mean, you might have to go have Thanksgiving dinner with them, but, right? All of us. We are not allowed the privilege of choosing who are going to be members of our family. Labor is, in fact, a family whether we want to be or not. We only have one thing that we bring to the world, our ability to work. That's all. And that's what makes us a family. And it doesn't really matter what language we speak or whether we think we're better off than someone else. The fact is, whether we want to be or not, we are a family. Now, some families make it and some families don't. And therein lies our problem. Some families survive and flourish and help each other out, and some families dissolve and get scattered to the winds, and you never hear from them again. And that is the issue that faces us. But this is in essence a family conference, and it is appropriate and critical that the major work of this conference be focused on what are we going to do to change things in our locals, in the National Council, in the labor councils, in the Federation, and the CLC. That is an appropriate focus. It's healthy, it's good. But it's important that while we focus on those actions that we need to take, that we take some time to understand the nature and source, the root problems of racism. There is no question that within the Canadian Auto Workers Union, within every union in this country, in every church, in every institution, racism is a problem. It exists. Now, for some Canadians, this may come as a surprise. The question is, what is racism? Because you see, if we don't understand what it is, then we can't fight it. If we don't understand the nature of racism, then we'll be forced to continue to live with it. It is true that racism is part, unfortunately, of the labor movement, our family. But it's also critical that we understand that labor is not the source of that racism. Now, this is an important distinction. Racism is not simply being prejudiced. It's not simply the issue of discrimination. Racism has very little to do with individual beliefs and individual ignorance. It is true that people who are individually ignorant are racist, that's true, but that's not where racism comes from. It really has nothing to do with brown eyes and blue eyes or being short and tall. It really doesn't. We have lots of prejudice and discrimination in Canada. But you see, the discrimination against the French in this country, as abhorrent as it is not racism. There have been times in this country when to be a Ukrainian was the kiss of death. Some people tell me it's still that way. But that's not racism. There's discrimination against Catholics or Jews or Italians or Portuguese. And all of these things are bad and they must all be fought, but that is not synonymous with racism. The problem that we face as women, because you see the three of us up here who just spoke to you are all women, is a serious problem, but it's not the same thing as racism. So it's important that we look at this and ask ourselves, what is racism? How did it come about? What is its role in our society? Racism is an ideology, a carefully constructed set of beliefs that is intertwined and intimately connected with a specific time in history, a specific period in history. Prejudice against the guy that lives across the river or someone that lives across the lake, that's something that's gone on since the beginning of time. But racism is specific to a certain time period. Brothers and sisters, we need to say it openly because otherwise we can't fight it. Racism is an essential undergirding. It is a critical pillar of capitalism. That's what it is. It did not always exist. It was invented as one of the tools of building the world that we live in today. If you remove the historical understanding of racism, then you'll never be able to deal with it. It is part of the fabric and structure of this country. That's why it's so difficult to fight. If it were simply ignorance and stereotypes, we could deal with it in one generation. But it's not that. It's part of what built the nation. How does this function? How did it work? First, in Canada and the United States, in the West Indies and in Mexico and South America, all throughout this hemisphere, first and foremost, racism was used as an excuse for trying to wipe out a whole group of people. Genocide, trying to wipe out the native indigenous people. And that to kill them was to improve the land. Think about that. To wipe out everyone in the Caribbean, they almost successfully did that. They were a little less efficient in North America. Somehow was civilizing the islands.